and welcome to the Guerrilla Gardening Show, where topics of discussion are permaculture, native plants, medicinal plants, building community, and of course, growing food. I am one of your hosts, Mike Freeman from Dro TV, here with my co host, Sam Igo from Central Florida Abundance. What's happening, Sam?
How's it going, Mike? It's great to be here.
So we came together and are collaborating on this show so that we can have discussions about certain plants and topics and things that will help people be more educated in growing food. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're the resident expert on the show, Sam?
Well, thanks. I'm honored. But yeah, I've spent, the last 5 years of my career helping people learn how to grow food in Central Florida's climate with the resources that Central Florida provides. And personally, I've been growing for about a decade, and I've never really had too many financial resources. And so I've really focused on, how to use what's at hand. And that's what I try to teach people. And that's what I hope that we can convey, through this show is that you don't have to have a lot to start producing your own food, or even to build natural ecosystems. The plant material, the nutrients, they're available. We don't have to run to Lowe's or Walmart to go pick up a bag of soil amendments. We can go out and find those things where we are. And so that's what I've focused on teaching people, a more centropic style of growing. And then where I'm at on my property, I have a small farm that I'm working on. We're on a third of an acre, but we focus on high density, high managed areas. And so we're able to produce quite a lot on even such a small scale. And it's really something that, everybody could do if they have the interest. And so that's what I want to do is just share that information and get it out there, get people growing.
Excellent. We linked up 2 years ago now, I think. And
Yeah, you wanted me to come check out your garden. It's
yeah,
come
we
a
did
long way.
a nice episode that's been on my Mike's in the Garden channel. It's been up on YouTube for several years now, and lots of views, a lot of comments over the years on the many different things that I have in my food forest, which um, is thriving here in late June, early July, and I owe a lot of that to you helping me uh, not waste time on certain things, figure out, location of where I should be planting, watering schedules and nutrients and composting. So a lot of,
Those are the kind of things that overwhelm people. You get all those little pieces, and then it just becomes too much. But as you've seen, when you just start putting stuff in the ground, and you've selected things that are pretty well suited for your area, they just grow well. That's what the environment wants to do is produce these healthy habitats. So if we just give it a little bit of a kickstart, then it can really take over after that.
yeah, absolutely. And so now we're collaborating on this guerrilla gardening show to talk about many different things that you're growing, that I'm growing, our experience, and maybe some, education and helpful tips for people to grow their own food because the more people we can get growing food, the better.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we'll definitely, as the episodes progress, as we get into different topics, we're going to be covering specific plants, how to care for them, where they would prefer to be planted, and trying to reduce some of that complexity that people see when they first approach the garden. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, all we do is facilitate growth. And I think that's a big part of what the takeaway from this show will be. I think we've both learned a lot from our experiences. We've grown out a lot of plants, um, and I mean we both know lots of people that are growing in Central Florida. You know, have their own farms and production operations, huge gardens where they're you know growing things that most people wouldn't even consider. When you plant out a bunch of different grass species, it's hard to even tell the difference between them. But the birds and the insects, they know the difference, and it's very important to them to have that diversity. And so, with guerrilla gardening, with smart, mindful gardening, you are selecting species that are just going to be well adapted to the conditions you're putting them in. Because I mean, especially with some guerrilla gardening operations, we're not going to have a lot of opportunity to care for these plants. If we're planting things places that we may not be able to come back to, or nobody's going to be able to weed or water, we have to choose the plants that are going to be the most well suited for those conditions. And I've worked a lot with the Native Plant Society here in Florida, mostly to learn about Florida's natural ecosystems and learn how to integrate that back into people's gardens. And I mean, I really see, your garden has become an ecosystem. You're into an area that I'm less knowledgeable on, the avian sector. And I mean, you told me a lot about the birds in your yard.
Yeah.
What about like what all have you seen since you've started, incorporating, these more diverse species? Have your birds populations changed?
Yeah. Um, like I said, in one of our episodes we recorded about grapes, my muscadine grapes last year, birds ate every single one of them. I don't think they ever even had a chance to ripen, at least to the point for, human consumption. But um, all kinds of birds and hawks, and naturally the more flowers that I have is going to bring in more types of bugs and insects. That's going to bring in the birds to eat the bugs and insects and keep this, natural ecosystem thriving. I've my butternut squash that's randomly growing out of my compost because I stirred it up a couple months ago, is self-pollinating. There's a squash on there, probably 12 to 15 inches tall. And there's several squashes that are, have already flowered and are fruiting now. So, just these amazing things that happen that I don't think would happen if it was just I'm trying to grow squash and nothing else.
Yeah, you're perpetuating the natural cycle and allowing it to just go. You built a healthier habitat. Now, my real question, do you see? I mean, I don't know what your relationship like in with your neighbors, but you do live in a very urban subdivision.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you, notice the same kind of animal activity in your neighbors' yards, or are most of them, congregating on you?
Uh, yeah, I definitely see, more birds and animals in general now. I have cranberry hibiscus all over my property, and so naturally some of my neighbors have cranberry hibiscus growing on their property too. So um,
That's the best way to grow a garden, I'd say. You didn't even plant it there; you
sweet
just planted
potato
it near
crept
there.
under the fence onto my neighbor's property.
They should
Um,
thank you for that.
and a lot of my neighbors thank me because they've, you know, uh, have enjoyed some of the fruits of my labor as well. I can't eat 100 pounds of sweet potatoes when I've harvested some. So it only makes sense to practice abundance and, pass some of it forward. So, um, Sam, can you talk a little bit more about your company, Central Florida Abundance?
Yeah, absolutely. So my company mostly focuses on education and maintenance of syntropic and more natural style garden systems. But I do also, or for a long time, I strictly installed and planted these gardens for people. Um, and now I find it more fulfilling to help take care of them. But I do try to educate people on what they need to do to, create a more syntropic style system. And really the key to that is incorporating lots of plants that are meant to cycle nutrients through the system. And by that, I mean chop and drop plants. My gardens, I would say, are over 60% of the species are meant there to be cut and then turned into mulch on the soil surface. That's a big step that, I mean, I would say almost every garden doesn't have. Um, and the the maintenance of it can seem a little daunting, but really what happens is it gets you more involved in the garden, especially if you're not growing, food. You may plant your plants and then water them for a little bit and then not think about them anymore. But, you know, when we spend the time out there in the garden, even just chopping these plants down, it opens our eyes to more observations. Maybe you'll catch some insects before they become a problem. Maybe you'll find a flower that you wouldn't have noticed if you hadn't had to go work in the garden today. But the key is playing a role in the garden. With these chop and drop species, they don't, well, they do chop and drop themselves, just not very efficiently on our time scales. If we left them, in 100 years, it'll probably build a healthy site, but we'd rather have that sped up to, I mean, 2 to 5 years is not unreasonable with good management, from desolate soils. I've worked a lot in urban backyards, where there's essentially no topsoil. The ground has been heavily disturbed and compacted, and nothing's been grown there for a long time. But the once you start, incorporating these plants that are meant to grow with deep root systems that pull nutrients from deep into the ground. They stimulate microbes in the soil. And then when we cut their top growth, all of those nutrients that they've absorbed can then be broken down and feed the microbes again that are around the roots of, in my situation, my vegetable plants. And so, most of my food plants are annuals in my situation. I have a perennial food forest garden that's really just a small piece of my property. My main farm is focused on growing annual produce, and so it takes a lot of nutrient dense soil to really adequately keep those things healthy season after season, especially when we're harvesting a lot and taking those nutrients out of the system. And we do compost what we use in our kitchen, but a lot of our produce will go out, to market or to friends, and then those nutrients are lost to us. And so we use a couple specific species, and they're really just species that are well acclimated for our situation. And that is a large portion of the plants we have. And our maintenance on the farm usually consists of going out, cutting down these grass or shrub species, and then chopping them up or just laying them down around our annual produce. And so it's a different style of gardening. And so I teach people about it when they're interested. It's not something that can be forced onto somebody because it really is something that needs to be kept up with. Um, but if you're interested in, growing the most nutrient dense plants, um, and repairing soils and building habitat, then it's really the only way to garden. A lot of times I have lots of landscaper friends and I'll see their projects and I'm like, I mean, it looks pretty right now when you planted it, but I can't even imagine what it would take to keep it looking like this. You
Sure.
know, when you have these huge spacings between the plants with nothing growing underneath, you're going to have weeds. And most of my clients won't spray herbicides, which I think is a good choice. But if you have landscaping like that, there's really no way to control most of the time your weeds or grass from growing around your plants. You know, you put mulch down, but putting mulch down once doesn't keep growth away because, I mean, mulch breaks down. Organic matter mulch like wood chips or straw or pine straw, those are all going to break down and feed the weed growth over time. Um, and then when you use mulch like rock or shells in Florida specifically, it's very much not recommended because the heat here in the summers heats up those things and will just cook the roots of your plants. And it does look, you know, very pretty when it's first done, but then, you know, what's the long-term plan like for this? In my systems that I teach people how to grow, the long-term plan, if you were to step away, I would say, you know, in some systems we'll use some more aggressive species that I would say if you're going to step away, you should probably take those out. But the trees, you know, our perennial shrubs and herbs and the ground covers, they're just going to continue to grow if we were to leave this property. And then whoever stumbles upon it and however many years is going to have a whole jungle to sort through and see what they can find back here. So that's what I really try to teach people is how to garden for longevity and sustainability. Um, but again, it's really only for those who are interested in it. But I think someday it should be the norm. You know, having that traditional desolate landscaping in front of your yard should not be the goal that everyone strives for. They should strive for having a healthy yard. You know, however it looks, if the soil's healthy, if you know the ecological community around it is thriving, then you know you've done better than having a pretty lawn in the
Yeah,
grand scheme of things.
for sure.
But yeah, what so your background is completely different. You're more recently into gardening and growing food. Tell us a little bit more about like where you have come from.
Yeah, I'm from New England, born and raised, and moved here to Orlando 6 years ago, and dabbled in some, attempts at growing some beans and squash. And we've actually had sweet potatoes the longest, probably 4 years we've been growing sweet potatoes. Um, but I had started Dro TV in 2022, which was a cannabis media company, and we did over 200 episodes of a couple different podcasts where it was really conversations with people in the cannabis industry to build a community around plant medicine. And that kind of parlayed itself into not supposed to, shouldn't, maybe not grow weed here in Florida, since it's illegal currently. Um, but I learned what permaculture is and always wanted to turn my backyard sandbox into a place that could have some thriving fruit trees and a food forest, essentially. So, with some help from our friend Jim Gale at Food Forest Abundance, I was able to get a blueprint of how I can design a food forest, or take the blueprint, take that design, and build my food forest. And so I turned that into Mike's in the Garden, which is my YouTube and channel, really just documenting my experience growing. And I was a DJ for 20 years and have a background in radio and television production. And I had a record label, which I'm still a part of, and um, always interested in the media landscape. So I'm really excited for people to watch these episodes. Hopefully, they learn something. I will say, I hope part of our goal is to, at some point, have like a weekly episode or an episode where people can engage in real time, where we can take questions, answer questions, and really have a start to build a community that way. So, um, really excited to get some interviews as well. I think we know some people that can uh, also elaborate on some subjects that we know a little bit about, but they have some knowledge in those areas as well. So
Bring in the experts.
yeah. So right now we're planning on at least one episode a week, 15 to 20 minutes, talking about specific subject or plant or tree or propagation or and then I think that's a great way to get some of this knowledge out there.
Absolutely. I I think it's going to be great, and I hope everybody enjoys watching this. And leave us a comment if there's something you're struggling growing. If something is just causing you immense amount of headache, drop it in the comments. And if you shouldn't be growing it, tell me what you're growing and where you're at. Just give me a general idea, and I could probably tell you it's just going to be more work than you want to put into it.
For sure. Great. Well, Sam, this was our introductory episode to get people to know a little bit more about ourselves and what they can expect from the podcast. We're going to start recording some episodes now so we can get them out to the public. So, yes, if you have comments, questions, problems, concerns about things that you're growing and need some help with, please comment down below. It may end up in a future episode, or we may do a whole episode about it. So, Sam, my friend, I'm excited to get this journey started, and you can check out the first actual episode of this podcast right now.
Thanks for watching, y'all.